Check, check. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out. I'm glad the weather held off. And welcome to the film screening of Deskaheh. My name... My name is Allan Downey. I'm Tekenikhon and an associate professor in the Department of History and Indigenous Studies Department here at McMaster. I'm also one of the co-creators of the film, and I'll be your host for today's event. In a few minutes, we'll begin with a short introduction and screening of the film, and following that, we'll be joined by the co-creators of the animation, including directors Tekenikhon Doreen, Jersee Hill, producer Rick Monture, and our animator Saki Murotani, who will share some of their insights into the process of creating the animated short. Finally, we'll conclude today's events with a Q&A, and everyone is invited to join us for food and drinks in the atrium just outside here after the event. But before we begin, I would like to take a minute to recognize both the Indigenous Studies Department and the Department of History for helping co-host this screening. A couple of weeks ago, when the idea first came together for this event, I sat down with the students who helped create the animation and warned them not to be discouraged if only 20 people showed up. It's a small independent film. How many people could we possibly get? Well, in hindsight, I'm happy to say that I was wrong, and a few more than 20 showed up. So in order to put on an event this size, it takes a lot of heavy lifting from the staff in both departments, including Aurelia, Andrew, Rita, and Nicole. So thank you very much to them for helping put this event together. I also want to thank the staff at the theater here. They're incredible. They set up all the easels, they take care of all the PowerPoints and the animation itself to help us show it and to open up this space. So thank you to them as well. I really appreciate it. Also, I want to thank everyone that is here to support this project today. I know we have guests and family members who traveled from Tekenikhon, Six Nations, Guelph, Toronto, and even Montreal, as well as students from the STEAM Academy, the Gawineo School, the Learning Nest from Hamilton Wentworth District School Board, as well as many of the more than 25 partners who all helped put this project together. Thank you for showing Indigenous youth that Indigenous stories deserve a stage. They deserve to be told in big and beautiful ways to large audiences. So thank you very much for making the effort to come here today. So the animation you're about to see weaves the profound story of Haudenosaunee leader Deskaheh Levi General's travels from Six Nations of the Grand River to the League of Nations between 1923 and 1925, where he sought to gain international recognition of the Haudenosaunee sovereignty. The animation is the result of an Indigenous youth mentorship program here at McMaster, which I'll discuss in a few minutes, that empowers Indigenous youth to co-create digital animations that bring Indigenous histories to life for public education. To help place the film in its historical context and to honor us with an opening, I would like to introduce an incredibly special person to the film project in Professor Rick Monture. Dr. Monture is Mohawk Turtle Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River and served as a producer and research consultant on the animation. His historical expertise and commitment to the project was invaluable over the past 2 years as he helped us put the film together and connect it with several key partners. So please help me in welcoming Professor Rick Monture.
Yeah, Alan told me there'd be 20 people here. If I'd known so many people were coming, I would ask for a ride. There's a bunch of friends and neighbors and folks that I've known over the years, so nyama for coming out, everybody, in this weather. I was talking to Alan and we talked about this day, and I thought, well, you know, it's probably an appropriate time to do Ganyuhanyok, our opening address. Now I'm nervous because I'm going to do it in Gayokono, and there's some language teachers here and students, so have pity on this lowly Indigenous Studies professor here. Try it like Gayokono. I asked around, but nobody wanted to do it, so stuck with me. I'll explain later for other folks who aren't aware of it. Nandan the Gant Gokta and Swatang Seal, Sky Point go Awado. Ne Hetwai Hanganto, Sangwa Ediso, Sangwa We Neganohano. Ne Owe Scano to Notanyo, Ne Dine and Wayhek, Iha, Scott and Dwyer, Guanagoha. Scott and Watanohano, Litoganio don't go Guanagoha. Dane and what true, we sa Hawanjage, Dwanoha, de Dwahunkwa, Ne Quaton Set Nieha. Ne Dine and Wayhek, Guego de Duhonyo, Litoganio don't go Guanagoha. Dane and what true, we Hodai Hundonyo, that snake set in the Havian and hey. Nedine and Wayhek, Scott, Ditinohonyo, Litoganio donk, Ogonagoha. Dane and Watrowi, Sadogawana Skanyandayo, Oi Hawana, at the Twatsa, ne Tosahaiwant Twant, set out Song Goyhank, or hand up Horashu Dinungi. Nedine and Wayhek, this was the Nohonyo, Sadogawana Skanyandayo, Litoganio donk, Ogonagoha. Dane and what true we gate nukadage hodia hyakyo no ne dio can't you ne scano do notanyo. Ne dine and wayhek, Scott ditinohonyo, hodia hyakyo no ne dio can't you don't. Ne toganio don't go on a goha. Dane and what true we honhage ganghede hana grace of what ediso. Ne so to secto, ne scano I do notanyo. Ne dine and wayhek, this was the nohonyo, ganghede hana grace of what ediso. Ne toganio don't go on a goha. Daneto nakatkoini ige egaingandak kinyohanyo. Daneto. So for those folks who don't know, that's how we begin gatherings such as this, and meetings and ceremonies and our traditional Haudenosaunee ways. It's a little speech that was given to us by our Creator when our first ancestors first walked this earth, when we were first created. And it's all about giving thanks. It's about giving thanks for each and every one of us in this room today that made it here safely. It's good to see all your smiling faces. We've all come together, in this case, to watch this film that Allan and his crew have put together. And we've all made it here safely, and it's good to see each other. And as a group, then, we give thanks. We give thanks to Mother Earth. We give thanks to everything that she holds. She's getting ready to rest with the snow and stuff, and that's all good. And we give thanks to all the helpers, the assigned helpers, we call them, that take care of us each and every day, from the plants and the medicines to the food and the trees, animals, all of those things, the sun, the moon, the stars. We give thanks to our leader, our spiritual leader, Skanyandayo, Handsome Lake. And we give thanks to the four beings that got us here safely today and take care of us as we venture home afterwards. And finally, to the Creator for making this all possible, and that we're able to gather today. So, in this, I've been here for 30 plus years now, and I was telling Allan about all the different connections with Deskaheh Levi General, as we know. But for many people in the room, we also know that Deskaheh is a title that's been handed down since the earliest formation of our great law of peace. The first Cayuga Bear Clan chief was named Deskaheh, 1,000 more years ago than that. And we still have a current title holder in Deskaheh, who is now presently Steve Jacobs. But before that, when we got started here at Six Nations, when we got started here at McMaster, just right after Oka, the then holder of that title, Harvey Longbotcat, was a strong advocate for language, for bringing our intellectual traditions to the university here. And he and Arnie General Cat and others had talks with the university about doing just that, along with Don Martin Hill, who was a student here at that time. And a lot of traditional folks from Six Nations supported and came out to those events. Many of them are here today. And that's how Indigenous Studies got started in 1989, 90, 91, in that era. And I always remember going to meetings. I was a student here then. I remember going to meetings, and Harvey and Arnie Kent were usually always here, being a part of those meetings, meeting with the president of the university at the time and other authority figures, I guess. And they insisted that we do the opening that I just did as a way to give thanks. That's our protocol. Long before there was talk of land acknowledgements and all that business, our leaders, they were both Confederacy chiefs, our leaders understood that if you want to do business, if you really want to get work done, you have to do it in a good way, and you can do it in our way. So 30 plus years ago, they were indigenizing this place, you know, with our traditions and our protocol. So I've always tried to maintain that when we do things here, in honor to their memory and their legacy, and the idea that this is what's important, long before this land acknowledgement thing got introduced. But that's a whole other story. But anyway, I also want to say that Harvey had, like I said, a big bearing on what we do here, and all these years later, Arnie did too. And it's really great to see all our young students here from Gawaneo and STEAM and other places, because it was for you that these people understood that we can get together at this university. Supposedly smart people hang out here. I've been here a long time, I'm not so sure of that sometimes. But that our youth could come here, and our traditions, our intellectual traditions, our languages, all the things that we know and we've been brought up to believe and understand has a place here, that our traditions are on equal height with Western science. In some ways we're a little bit farther ahead, but that's okay, they'll catch up. But the big important thing is that we're here to do this together as human beings, because climate change is something that we all have to face. Political unrest and conflict resolution is something that we all have to figure out now more than ever. And I always hear those words that those folks were saying way back then, talking about changes in the environment back then before we heard about it, talking about sustainability, talking about conflict resolution, how to work through conflicts between peoples and nations. And back then it was Oka we were predominantly talking about, but now it's worldwide, as we see on the daily news. So I think a lot of what Harvey and Arnie and others talked about with the university at that time is coming true today. But they always wanted to pave a path for the young folks to come here. Their initial vision was, because Gawaneo had just started just a few years before that, their initial vision was for those students who were then at Gawaneo to come up through the system, learn their language, learn their traditions, and then come here and be able to talk about things like the Great Law and things of the environment in the language here at the university level. And we're getting there slowly, but we're getting there, and that's the important thing. So it's so great to see so many young folks here, people from Six Nations, and Nama for that. So I think that's my remarks for now. I just want to raise that connection between Deskaheh Levi General, Deskaheh Harvey Longboat, and just the connections between McMaster, Six Nations, and the political and social landscape that we're in now, and the environmental one too. Very, very important things to consider. So anyway, with that, I also want to say now with Allan and his team, he gave me a lot of credit just now. I don't think I deserve that. I answered a few emails and a couple telephone calls, but largely the work was his and his students. So it's a great little production. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Nama.
Well, thank you very much for that opening and for centering us and putting the film into context, but also the incredible legacy that's been left here and we continue to try to live up to. I should mention that Professor Monture has a terrific class this winter in Indigenous Studies titled 20th Century Indigenous Rights and the Legacy of Chief Deskaheh. So for those interested, please check that out. You can find out more information through the Indigenous Studies website or page. So, the animated short Deskaheh. It's been a massive undertaking and an intense labor of love for over 2 years for the purposes of bringing this story to light. The film is only 12 minutes long, but it involved 2 years of research, a full year to write a script that's only 2 pages long, over 1,100 hours of work, hundreds of meetings and emails, months of preparation for the voiceover and a dozen recordings, as well as over 25 partners, the majority of them from Six Nations. These partners included research consultants such as Rick Monture, Heather George, Rick Hill, and History MA grad Grace Wilcox. We also incorporated the music of musicians Logan Stats and the Six Nations women singers, many of whom are here today, thanks to Professor Bonnie Freeman and Sadie Buck. Artists Dakota Brandt and Corey Hill contributed their brilliance. Sound technician Eric Anderson from True Seed Media and Six Nations recorded and edited the voiceover. Photographer Colin Schaefer contributed a wonderful piece of his work, and the project included several partnerships, including with the Woodland Cultural Center, who have a terrific must-see museum exhibit on Deskaheh right now in Brantford. So I encourage everybody to go check that out at the Woodland Culture Center. We were also fortunate to receive some terrific feedback and guidance from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council at Six Nations as we put this story together. All told, the brilliance of our partners was brought together by three incredible Indigenous youth, who all happen to be undergraduate students here at McMaster, in Tekenikhon Doreen, Jersey Hill, and Kira Gibson, who all helped co-create this film alongside our remarkable animator, Saki Murotani, who you will get to meet in a few minutes. Okay, now I know everyone's anxiously awaiting the film screening, but as any good host should do, I have to build the suspense, of course. It's only 12 minutes long. So if I may, I'd like to share a story actually about how the film came about. So I'll go to the next slide. Perfect. So last year, in 2023, I very quietly and delicately launched an Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program here at the university titled Resurgent Histories, the Indigenous History Lab at McMaster University. Resurgent Histories is an Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program and hub that brings together Indigenous youth, artists, scholars, and community-based organizations to manifest Indigenous histories by creating digital animations for public dissemination. The theoretical underpinnings of the lab is simple. Ultimately, the project's foundation contends that Indigenous histories can play an active role in Indigenous community revitalization. In Indigenous studies, that set of ideas is known as resurgence. As communities rebuild and reclaim the fires of their governance, languages, laws, land stewardship, self-determination, and nationhood, historical research and storytelling, I argue and hope, can play an active role in this. So the idea for the mentorship program actually originated a few years ago in 2020 with the creation and release of the digital animation Haudenosaunee Ironworkers, which was co-directed by then undergraduate student Carly Loft from Ganawage and myself. Illustrated by Saki Murotani, Haudenosaunee Ironworkers was a deeply collaborative effort between Ganyagahaga artists, musicians, community consultants, and the Culture Center in Ganawage. And what started as a small, modest project went on to receive an award from the American Indian Film Institute, appear in several international film festivals, and was featured at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian in New York City, as well as on all Alaskan airline flights from 2021 to 2022. I never saw that one coming. So I often joke, and I've made this joke before, that the film went viral. But when I say that, I mean academic viral, which isn't very viral at all. But people seem to like it. Well, from that and other tremendous kind of experiences of working with Indigenous youth, they inspired me to pursue a more formal youth mentorship program, which turned into the Resurgent Histories Lab here at McMaster. As the first test and large undertaking of the mentorship initiative, I began approaching community partners and mentors in Six Nations. Many of these relationships had been established for over a decade, and I began recruiting Indigenous youth to serve as paid research interns and ultimately co-lead the project. This is when I met Tekenikhon Doreen, Jersey Hill, Kira Gibson, and Grace Wilcox, all students at the university who helped contribute to the project in different ways. After floating several ideas for a focus on a new film, ultimately the timing, the story, and the community interest in Six Nations ended up directing us to an obvious topic. It was going to be a film focused on Haudenosaunee leader Deskaheh Levi General from Six Nations of the Grand River for the 100th anniversary of his travels to the League of Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, on behalf of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council between 1923 and 1925. So, my own interest in the story of Deskaheh actually stemmed from a project I was working on about a decade ago, researching the history of lacrosse in Indigenous communities. While I was at the Royal Ontario Archives in Toronto, I came across a dusty old set of boxes of hundreds of files, letters, government documents, and correspondence that rarely saw the light of day. And it was all related to a dispute in Six Nations in which the Attorney General of Ontario and the Department of Indian Affairs attempted to stop lacrosse games from taking place in the community in the early 1920s. The government officials deemed these games to be illegal under Canadian law because they broke a federal ban on Sunday activities. Well, as I searched through those boxes, I came across a remarkable poster, a lacrosse poster, advertising a Sunday lacrosse game at the Sour Springs Longhouse in Six Nations in 1922. From the newspaper coverage of the time, I knew thousands of spectators from the surrounding communities of Brantford, Paris, and even Buffalo would attend these games every Sunday, and they were incredibly popular. But on the bottom of that poster appeared the name Levi General. I found this surprising at first. I knew about Deskaheh Levi General's incredible story during this time, but the question was, what was he doing organizing lacrosse games? He had a lot of stuff going on at this time. Well, what I came to realize with the guidance of several mentors from the community was that Deskaheh Levi General was helping to organize these games in the community as a way for the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council to help pay for their lawyer and travels, raise funds for their sovereignty movement, and ultimately act as an act of Haudenosaunee self-determination. In response, the Attorney General of Ontario and the Department of Indian Affairs attempted to stop the games from taking place, often threatening the organizers with arrests and police action. And they went as far as organizing the RCMP to intervene and draw up arrest warrants. Now, these arrest warrants were never issued, but they can still be seen as part of that collection. So these actions by the Canadian government all fit in with a larger pattern of attempted Canadian domination at the time. You see, by the early 20th century, Haudenosaunee communities and Indigenous communities across Canada were witnessing an intense series of attacks on their historic institutions by the Canadian government. Through a series of laws, policies, and various forms of intimidation and violence, the Canadian government sought to assimilate Indigenous peoples, secure their lands, and eliminate their sovereignty. Indigenous communities across the country responded in different ways to these elimination tactics. In Six Nations of the Grand River, of course, a Haudenosaunee community 20 minutes from here, the hereditary Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council, understanding the Canadian government's actions as a direct attack on their self-determination, responded by leading a series of national and international appeals to gain recognition of their sovereignty. To do so, they selected Levi General, with the hereditary title Deskaheh, to travel to the League of Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, to be their public spokesperson between 1923 and 1925. So without further ado, it is our pleasure to present to you the short animated film, Deskaheh.
For the past several centuries, the Confederacy of Nations, known as the Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse of the Eastern Great Lakes, have been guided by the principles of the Great Law, which is the social, political, and spiritual center of their communities, led by the clan mothers and hereditary chiefs. Despite successfully upholding their traditions for generations, by the early 20th century, Haudenosaunee communities and Indigenous communities across Canada were witnessing an intense series of attacks on their historic institutions by the Canadian government. Through a series of laws, policies, including the Indian Act and involuntary enfranchisement, and various forms of intimidation and violence, the Canadian government sought to assimilate Indigenous peoples, secure their lands, and eliminate their sovereignty. Indigenous communities across the country responded in different ways to these elimination tactics. In Six Nations of the Grand River, a Haudenosaunee community in southern Ontario, the Hereditary Confederacy Council, understanding the Canadian government's actions as a direct attack on their self-determination, responded by leading a series of national and international appeals to gain recognition of their sovereignty. Building upon over a century of Haudenosaunee activism, the community leaders first unsuccessfully appealed to the House of Commons in Ottawa in 1920 through their legal counsel. Undeterred, the Confederacy Council intensified their approach and decided to make an international appeal the following year. To do so, they selected Levi General with the hereditary title Deskaheh to travel to England and be their public spokesperson, appointing him as Speaker of the Six Nations Council in 1921. In their pursuit of gaining international recognition for their Haudenosaunee sovereignty, General and the Confederacy Council hired a lawyer from Rochester, New York, named George Decker. Traveling on his newly created Haudenosaunee passport as a further manifestation of their independent status, General traveled to London, England in 1921, where he presented the Confederacy Council's case to the Colonial Office in London, only to be brushed aside. Told that the Haudenosaunee grievance was a domestic concern and already rebuffed by Ottawa. General returned to Six Nations, where the Confederacy Council began planning a new and more prominent international appeal. In order to raise money for their legal counsel and the international appeal, General and various longhouses in Six Nations would host exceedingly popular lacrosse games in the community in the early 1920s, games that were deemed illegal under Canadian law due to a ban on Sunday activities. Together, the Department of Indian Affairs, the Attorney General of Ontario, and an organization known as the Lord's Day Alliance all attempted to stop the Six Nations community from organizing these games. Despite threats of arrests and fines, Deskaheh and the Confederacy Council continued to host the popular games as a performative protest to further assert their self-determination, attracting thousands of paying non-Indigenous spectators. The lacrosse controversy illustrated the many ways in which colonialism was masked and how Indigenous communities responded creatively to maintain their self-determination. With the help of funds raised from the games, in addition to raising money through bonds, General returned to Europe in the summer of 1923 to make his grandest appeal yet. This time, the Confederacy Council had the intent of bringing forth the Haudenosaunee case to the League of Nations, an organization located in Geneva, Switzerland, and formed after World War I to resolve international disputes. It was here, armed with a pamphlet known as The Red Man's Appeal for Justice, a silver peace pipe, and the friendship and 2-row wampum belts, General hoped to gain the support of international leaders to further recognize the Haudenosaunee sovereignty and their right to self-determination. After his arrival in Geneva, General would begin to captivate audiences across Western Europe, traveling to various cities and lecturing in front of crowds of a few hundred to a few thousand on any given night. During his lectures, he detailed the Haudenosaunee sovereign status, their history, and the colonial tactics of the Canadian state. To be seen, heard, and thought of as an Indigenous person at the time, General had to meet the stereotypical expectations of his audience and play Indian, which included wearing a Plains headdress. As all of this was a great embarrassment to the Canadian government and Department of Indian Affairs led by Duncan Campbell Scott, Canadian officials proceeded to attempt to discredit General's efforts and target the Confederacy Council and its supporters. As part of their response, Canadian officials established an RCMP detachment in Six Nations in 1922, leading to several confrontations and police harassment. In the following year, while Deskaheh was in Europe, Scott maneuvered to remove the Confederacy Council's authority, further imposing the Indian Act in the community, as the federal government did with communities across the country, and looked to replace the hereditary Confederacy Council with the fully elected Chief and Council. Scott found support for this change in government in a small but vocal group in Six Nations. Because hereditary chiefs among the Haudenosaunee wore deer antlers as part of their headdress as a sign and symbol of their authority, the group at Six Nations who advocated for the elected system were known as dehorners. All of this came to a head on October 7, 1924, when Indian agent Colonel C.E. Morgan, under the instruction from Scott and Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King, read an order in council removing the Confederacy Council from power. The RCMP ascended upon the council meeting to disband the hereditary leadership, confiscated a bag of wampum and various other documents, and Morgan proceeded to post a proclamation announcing the banned council elections under the Indian Act for October 21st, 1924. Despite the Canadian government's expulsion of the leadership in Six Nations, the Confederacy Council continued on and remained active following the events of 1924. Although they were no longer recognized as the official governing body in the community, and the consequences of the Canadian government's forced removal of the council would reverberate for generations. Still in Geneva at the time of the removal of the Confederacy Council, General continued to actively pursue an audience with the League of Nations. Finding some support among European audiences and their leadership, Canada and Great Britain actively suppressed General's appeal to the League by portraying it as a domestic concern to international leaders, furthering their assertion that the Haudenosaunee were subjects of the British Crown and a Dominion of Canada. Despite centuries of international relations proving otherwise, including treaty relationships such as the Haldimand Proclamation of 1784, Canada was ultimately successful in rebutting General's appeal and convincing League members not to pursue the matter further. Gravely ill and forced into exile in the United States by the Canadian government, General left Geneva in January 1925, returning to Rochester, New York, where he would deliver one of his most passionate and ultimately last speeches of his life. On March 10, 1925, General would appear on the radio in Rochester making one last appeal.
We are tired of calling on the governments of pale-faced peoples in America and in Europe. We've tried that and found it was no use. They deal only in fine words. We want something more than that. We want justice from now on. After all that has happened to us, that is not much for us to ask. The governments at Washington and at Ottawa have a silent partnership of policy. It's aimed to break up every tribe of Redmen so as to dominate every acre of their territory. Over in Ottawa, they call that policy Indian advancement. Over in Washington, they call it assimilation. We, who would be the helpless victims, say it's tyranny.
In the wake of the League of Nations appeal and following General's death on June 27, 1925, other prominent Haudenosaunee rights activists would continue the work of the Confederacy Council. In 1926, Clinton Rickard, David Hill, and Sophie Martin all co-founded the Haudenosaunee rights organization, the Indian Defense League. In the following year, Paul K. Daibo successfully fought for Haudenosaunee border crossing rights in U.S. federal court. And in 1930, Emily General, the niece of Levi General, traveled to London, England with a small group of community members to further reassert the Haudenosaunee right to self-determination and later became a critical advocate for Indigenous-controlled education in the community of Six Nations. While General and the Confederacy Council were not successful in gaining an official international endorsement of the Haudenosaunee sovereignty at the time, Deskaheh Levi General would leave a remarkable legacy, one that can still be felt today, on the 100th anniversary of his travels to the League of Nations.
Now I wish I knew your name, so that I could find your grave, and I'd sing your ghostly soul, and I'd tell you you were wrong with your husband's ashes in the backseat, calling that box by his first name. She refused to say goodbye, not even after flames. And I want a love like that, through the thick and through the thin. And I want a love that Cross the ocean, through the storm. Cross the desert in the sun. Now all my love was left me. Every single word. Now I wish I knew your name.
Thank you, thank you. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the brilliant team. So if I can have them come up and join us, I'll introduce them one by one, and you can get their perspective on what it was like to create the film Deskaheh. Come on up. Grab a seat. So I'll begin with Tekenikhon Doreen. Tekenikhon is Ginyagahaga, Bear Clan from Tandanaga, Mohawk Territory. Co-director of the film Deskaheh, Tekenikhon is currently a third-year honors student in Indigenous Studies and a recent recipient of the Humanities Essay Award here at McMaster. As I've gotten to know Tekenikhon over the past year and a half, I can say without hesitation that I have never met someone with the strength and of leadership qualities that Tekenikhon possesses. From the very beginning of the project, Tekenikhon was the engine that made much of this film come together. So please help me in welcoming Tekenikhon Doreen to the stage.
What an introduction that was. Thank you, Dr. Downey. Sego sewa gwego, Tekenikhon yungyats, Doreen dewak sanazare, Ginyagahaga niwago hojodo, Gandege nidawakano, Waxkarewage, Gaderi Riansta ne McMaster University. Hello everyone, my name is Tekenikhon, my last name is Doreen, my nation is Mohawk, I am from Gandege, Tandanaga, Mohawk Territory. I am Bear Clan and I study at McMaster University. I became involved with the Deskaheh project after watching a presentation in the Indigenous Transition Program last year. Dr. Downey came in and presented his previous film, Iron Workers, that he had completed with a previous student. During this presentation, he said, and I quote, "If you're interested in something your professors are doing, ask to be a part of it. The worst thing that can happen is they might say no. And the best thing that can happen is they have research, funding, and a project they need help with." Almost immediately after the presentation, I walked up and asked Dr. Downey if he had any opportunities for students. The next 48 hours were a complete blur. We had meetings, I filled out paperwork, and the next thing I knew, I was an undergrad research assistant with no idea what I was doing. Over this last year, I've proven to myself, turns out, I didn't know what I was doing. It just meant I was learning as I went. To all the students in the room, take risks and believe in yourself as much as others do. Great things can and will happen. My experience working on the animation has been absolutely amazing and definitely a highlight for my first year at McMaster. We began our project researching the story of Deskaheh Levi General. We were provided articles about the history of Levi General and the Six Nations of Grand River. Before writing the story or even thinking about bringing it to life, we had to learn the story. We read and reread the articles, and we discussed them at many team meetings, highlighting the parts of the story that resonated with us. This was the start of the flow of our ideas and thus led into the writing of the script and the designing of the animation. Writing and working on the script encompassed a lot more than just writing the story. We also talked and wrote about how to tell the story through art. Everything from the music and the moccasins and people walking to the horses, to the lacrosse scenes, beating scenes, and the color scheme, and the list goes on and on. Watching all of the ideas we talked about, wrote about, and undoubtedly dreamt about come to life in the final animation was incredible and beyond anything I could have ever dreamed of. One of my favorite parts working on Deskaheh was recording the narration. Something I can honestly say I never thought I'd do, but truly, this whole last year has been full of opportunities and experiences I never thought I'd do or be a part of. And I'm so grateful that working on this animation started it all. Narrating Deskaheh as a Ganyankehaga Haudenosaunee woman has truly been a great honor, recognizing and acknowledging the oral traditions of storytelling and the matrilineal society of Haudenosaunee women and the roles that they have in our histories and in our communities. Learning, rehearsing, and recording the voiceover was a lot of fun, a lot of work, and consisted of many months, many meetings, a whole lot of laughter, voice acting guidance, and amazing memories. The final recording was the most nerve-wracking thing for me. I feel like I was more nervous then than I am today. Thankfully, we had a lot of time and we were able to re-record multiple times until we were all happy with it. Again, I never thought it would turn out like it did. It was incredible. Once the script and recording were done, we sent them off to Saki, our animator, and we began the waiting game. She would draw our ideas from whatever we wrote and discussed, and then would send it back to us for changes and approval. At this point, we were the only ones seeing the animation and the work. This was the hardest part for me. I really, really don't like waiting, and I really, really love to share things when I'm excited. But it was also really fun and amazing to watch the progress and story come to life. At this point, I would like to thank my partner Ben, my family, my friends, and all the staff in ISS and ISD for listening to me ramble for the last year about this animation, and for sharing in my excitement, even though there were times when you truly had no idea why I was excited or what was happening. It made the waiting process for me a little bit easier. The process leading up to today has been a lot of fun, really exciting, and a good distraction from a busy semester. We started with a presentation at Indigenous Research Day hosted by Miri here at McMaster, where we pretty much got to tease the whole room in anticipation for today. It was a lot of fun and a good opportunity to share my experience. We have also met several times and have done interviews promoting the animation, and I also had the opportunities to talk in my classes, inviting my classmates and students that I TA'd to come. So for those that could make it, thank you. Today has been incredible, and I'm still shocked that it's happening. Watching the film on the big screen in a room filled with so many people has been an empowering feeling I will never let go of. Thank you for all taking the time out of the busy semester and the time of year to come and support the release of Deskaheh. I'm so excited to see where the future of the film goes. My hope is that it will inspire other Indigenous youth and students to learn and reclaim their histories, take up space, and share your stories, your ideas, and your thoughts in whatever way that looks like to you. Your voice should be heard, and our collective, diverse histories deserve to be told by us. Yamagoa.
That was incredible. One of the things I think what doesn't show on the screen, but over the last 2 years, is the number of laughs that we were able to have. This was an incredible project, and with an incredible group of students to be able to make it happen. So, next is Jersee Hill. Jersey is Mohawk, Turtle Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River, and a fourth-year student in the Honors Applied Psychology and Human Behavior program here at McMaster. Co-director of the film Deskaheh, Jersey has previously served as a research intern at the McMaster Indigenous Research Institute and the University of Toronto, respectively. In getting to know Jersey over the past year, she never ceases to amaze me in the breadth and scope of her brilliance as a researcher, a writer, creative visionary. Jersey is remarkably talented, and we were so fortunate to have her help lead this project. So please help me in welcoming Jersee Hill.
Hi everyone, as Allan mentioned, my name is Jersey, and I am Mohawk from Six Nations, and I'm currently in my 4th year here at MAC. And so for the past year or so, I've had the privilege of working on this project alongside all the wonderful people up here today. And I'm really excited to be able to share my experience working on the project with you. But first, I just kind of wanted to share what my role was. And so basically, my role consisted of helping with writing and directing the project. And when I look back on the process of actually creating the animation, although I really enjoyed help writing with like pieces of the script, I think one of the most enjoyable parts that really stands out to me would definitely have to be our first meeting as a team, because this meeting was when we all kind of first came together in person, and it was when we built the storyboard for the animation, and this kind of involved us choosing which parts of Deskaheh's story we wanted to include and how we wanted to emphasize and portray that in the animation. And not only was it fun to just work with everyone and hear everyone's ideas, but it was also interesting because we had some interesting discussions because, as you saw in the animation, Deskaheh's story itself isn't necessarily linear in the sense that one thing doesn't necessarily happen right after the next, and a lot of things were happening kind of at the same time. So whereas some things were happening while Deskaheh was in Europe, some things were also happening at Six Nations. And so we had some interesting discussions about, I guess, how we wanted to include that and like kind of the transitions we wanted to do, but kind of still make sure that those transitions, like transitioning from one part of the story to the next, didn't take away from the flow of the story. And this meeting also consisted of just like mapping out which scenes would go where, and ultimately really marked the beginning of the project for me, and was what like made it start to feel really real. But one also thing I wanted to highlight is how much throughout the project I learned about Deskaheh's story and what that meant to me. And so, because although I'm from Six Nations and have lived there my entire life, I had actually not heard about Deskaheh and his story before the project. And so what was really powerful about working on this project is that it allowed me to not only learn about Deskaheh, but also more of my community's history, a lot of which I didn't know about prior. And so in reading the biographies about Deskaheh, it felt very personal to me in a sense, because it was almost as though as I learned more about Deskaheh's history, I was also learning more about my own. And that is something that I didn't really get to experience throughout other projects I've had the chance to work on at MAC. So that's something that has been really special to me. But something else I also wanted to talk about was how my role on this project has impacted the way I approach other projects I'm currently working on, as well as the ones that I hope to pursue in the future. But for a bit of context, like most programs here at MAC, I'm in a program where the main form of like research outputs are things like journal articles or presentations at conferences and reports and stuff like that. And while those things are still very valuable, they tend to stay within the academic environment and don't really reach a broader audience. And so luckily this animation is different, and it's a form of storytelling that can be understood and appreciated by everyone, regardless of their background. And so the potential to reach a much wider and more diverse audience is what excites me most about this project. And this aspect of the project is probably one that has become the most important to me, because unlike other projects I've worked on, as I mentioned, the output is something that many people can enjoy and learn from. And to be honest, I never imagined that I would be co-directing a digital animation as part of my undergrad experience, and at the start of my degree, I wasn't really sure what kind of opportunities would be available to me during my time at MAC. But this project has just served as a reminder to me that sometimes the most rewarding opportunities can come along when you least expect them. And so working on this animation has been a really rewarding experience for me, not only for the experience I gained while working on it, but also because it allowed me to learn more about my community's history. And so I think moving forward, it's inspired me to be more creative in the ways I approach projects in the future, with also hopes of being able to share knowledge in more accessible ways. And I hope you enjoyed watching the animation as much as I did. Thank you.
Next, we have Saki Murotani. Saki is a freelance animator and illustrator based in Vancouver, British Columbia. Actually flew in last night, but is originally from Hokkaido, Japan. She's been particularly involved in projects that revolve around Indigenous communities, academic research, nonprofit organizations, and multidisciplinary performances. Her highly crafted animation brings ideas, histories, and stories to life and her passion lies in visual storytelling through everything from complex animation to simple illustration. This is actually the second time that I've worked and had the opportunity to work with Saki, and the words that continue to come to mind when I think of her is creative genius. In addition to the awe-inspiring animation Saki creates that never cease to amaze me, she has this incredible ability to be a visionary and to take the most vague thoughts or complex requests and form something brilliant and beautiful from them that captures the stories we're attempting to tell. So please help me in welcoming Saki Murotani.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm Saki. I'm so happy to be here today to share the film with you all and talk a little bit about the process. So let's dive in. So I created a step-by-step process that I took to create this animation. So first was conceptualization. So ideas were generated and refined to produce an initial concept for the story. So after talking with Allan and the team, I created a mood board and style sheets like this to set an artistic direction and key look and feel. We decided to go with a sepia tone, graphite drawing look with purple hues. So those three elements were very key for the animation. Next step was script writing. So the concept was transformed into a script, outlining the narration and scene ideas for the entire animation. So Allan earlier said that the script was only 2 pages long, but actually the team provided me with 36-page document outlining all the ideas and details such as scene breakdown, animation notes with visual ideas, historical context, narration, supporting images, potential music ideas, etc. So from there, the actual storyboarding and creating animatics. So storyboard is a visual representation of the script, kind of like a comic book version of the animation. So those are the very early stage of storyboard. And then from there, I created animatics, which is a video version of the storyboard. So this is a very, very early stage of the production. So very raw. So those are the first few scenes. Now I thought of it, I should have drawn a little bit better than this because now on the big screen it's kind of embarrassing. And then from there, design and assets making. So this was where characters, settings, and visual elements got their final designs. Most drawings were done digitally on iPad with an Apple Pen. So this one was, I filmed some ink drops outside of the house with ink and the brush, and later used in the animation. These are the name drawings. You could kind of see the process of how I drew. and a lot of portrait drawings. This is not playing, but that's okay. Oh, there you go. And then from there, animation. So with the groundwork in place, a variety of techniques were used to animate each scene. Hand-drawn and computer-generated 2D and 3D images were animated to bring the story to life. So some key scenes are frame-by-frame animation, also known as cell animation. It is a traditional 2D animation technique where each frame is drawn individually by hand or by computer. So I'll show you some samples. So each frame is drawn individually. And then that will be combined to make an animation. So this is a dancing scene, lots of frames. The walking cycle, the water drum, and this is fire. Again, each frame is drawn. Then compositing, combining all the visual elements digitally into a final image. So this step is like a digital collage, combining all the images and animation into one. So voiceover recording was done at the same time. And so this is, so you saw the earlier, just a raw frame-by-frame animation, then combined together with backgrounds and ink. So this is earlier stage of the production. So above is the composite final animation, and the below is the animatics that the animation is based on. Then the sound and music. So sound effects and music were added to complement the animation and enrich the narrative experience. Then next was editing and post-production. The final step involved editing the animated scenes with titles, endings, and credits, and synchronizing them with the audio and performing final touch-ups. And then finally, release. Once everything is polished to perfection, the film is ready for release. And here you are today. Thank you very much.
Okay. The one thing that Saki is not telling you is, and I'll have to share, is just how incredibly patient and understanding Saki is with us, and with me in particular, because we always make last-minute changes. And so the dancing scene, for instance, we changed 4 days before it was to come out, which is dozens and dozens and dozens of redrawing the scene itself. Frame by frame by frame. And so been an incredible person to work with. At this time, I'm going to ask Professor Rick Monture to come back and join us, and we have time for questions. I don't want to keep everybody for too long, but I thought we could talk about the process, or Deskaheh Levi General's story a little more. And so I would invite people to come up and there's 2 microphones on the side if you would like. You can come up and ask a question. If you're not able to get up, you can raise your hand. There'll be a runner kicking around with a microphone. And as people are thinking of questions, and if you want to line up, please feel free to do so. I'd actually want to ask the first question to Professor Monture. Because the story of Deskaheh and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy's remarkable efforts in the 1920s is incredibly complex and layered. We're not able to get to all those layers and that complexity in ultimately what is 12 minutes, 10 minutes, not including the credits. And so I wanted to ask Professor Monture, with his historical expertise, what's something that you would want audiences to know about this story, or maybe build on that we hadn't seen?
Than 5. There we go. Worked. There is a lot to tell here for sure. Several decades preceding 1924 and the events therein were, I guess, escalating. But I guess 3 things to share. And there's a lot more to this story, but this is a great, great entryway. And I just also want to say thank you, Nawa, to Saki. Allan made these last-minute changes seem so easy because they just appeared out of nowhere, but I didn't realize it took as long as it did to get those very last-minute things tweaked just right. So thank you. I think 3 important things is that first, Deskaheh Levi General was although he was an individual who was appointed by the Confederacy Council to speak on behalf of 6 nations of the Grand River and the Confederacy Council there, in Geneva and in the UK in the early 20s. What's important to remember is that he spoke on behalf of the entire Confederacy Council of Chiefs and Clan Mothers, a collective that had been in place amongst our people for, like I said, over 1,000 years. So the Western world likes to sort of think of individual leaders, kings and queens and leaders and this and that, presidents, prime ministers, whatever the case may be, chiefs, right? Levi General was an individual, and he spoke on behalf of all of our people. So although his oratorical skills were incredible, and he was the person for that job chosen by our leaders, he carried this collective message. And I think people might lose sight of that in a world that kind of elevates individuals. Joseph Brandt's a very similar character, right? Because he's often considered the leader of the 6 nations at a particular time in the American Revolution and shortly thereafter. But there's little that he could have done as an individual voice. Same with Deskaheh. They speak with the entire Confederacy in mind, so I think that's important to remember. There's a collective philosophy and understanding of who we are as a sovereign people, and that was at the center of these events. And the other thing, too, is that Canada obviously came up with the Indian Act in 1876, which said that there'd be more traditional governments in our communities, Native communities in Canada. That was all to be done away with, and in favor of elected band councils that were, of course, controlled by Ottawa and the Indian Act policies. But for 50 years, nearly 50 years, they left 6 nations alone in that regard, because the Confederacy Council was working so efficiently. So they were very hesitant to make changes at that time. They had probably thought about it, but they really had no reason to do so. And if you go back in the correspondence, historical records, they'll say as much. So in the film makes reference to the DeHorners, a handful of folks at Six Nations who were not entirely satisfied with the Confederacy Council for whatever reasons that may be, and but any community, any government, any town, municipality, everyone has issues with their government, right? It's just the way it is, and Six Nations is no different. And Ottawa paid very little attention to that early DeHorner movement, but after the First World War in 1914, 1918, and Canada, of course, if you know, that's when Canada really kind of became a country, its own national identity. And they also began to think more about their reputation in the world. And in that time period, it's not good for a bunch of Indigenous people to be running around practicing ceremonies and having the traditional governments if Canada wanted to be like a civilized country, sort of Christian thinking, that kind of. So that's when the real assimilative policies really dug deep, residential schools among them, but other things. But that's when Ottawa, after the First War, is when they really paid more attention to this DeHorner movement and the need to, dismantle or remove the Confederacy Council of Chiefs. So, although there were rumblings prior to the First World War, it was really after that, those few years immediately afterwards, where the pressure was ramped up, and that's when Deskaheh was directed to go to UK in 22, 23, and some of the fundraising campaigns to get him over there at that time. And so that, of course, caused great embarrassment to Canada. There's this, Haudenosaunee guy, this Cayuga chief running around London and later Geneva and the League of Nations, discrediting Canada, saying that there's a military presence on our reserve, that they are acting sort of in an unjust way towards our people, mandating that we take on the elected system, disregarding our sovereignty and our autonomous nationhood that had been in place for millennia. And Canada didn't like that. So with all the disruption that he was doing, he became a person of interest, I guess, to Canada. And so as the film mentions, briefly, that he was not really allowed, he wasn't allowed back into Canada when he did return from Geneva in 24, after the removal of the Confederacy in October 24. When he did come back in early 25, I think, he did not enter back into Canada for fear that he would be arrested or his family would be arrested. And that's when he stayed at the home of Clinton Rickard, a Tuscarora leader over just Lewiston, New York, not too far from here at all. But he was fearful of coming into Canada. And so that says a lot, and his family was intimidated. Folks there at Six Nations know that story by the RCMP. It's said that there was an RCMP mounted police force that would that would go to the home of Clinton Rickard as an intimidation thing and go by their house, so showing, which is an international event when a Canadian military force goes into U.S. soil to intimidate an Indigenous fellow. So he never did make it back to Six Nations. He passed away in June of 25, and a very, frustrated and sad but defiant person. So these are the sorts of things that Canada needs to be accountable for too, the way that they intimidated his family and him. So our leaders are not allowed back into our own country, into our own territory. So that story, is also part of this, and so much more. But this is just, a fantastic kind of starting point for all the other side stories that have taken place. And as Jersey was saying, it's not something that's widely known or taught about these days. I'm old enough now, I heard these stories. But, we sort of moved on in a way, but in the centenary of the removal of Confederacy and Deskaheh's passing next June, it's a good time to revisit those things, because if you really look back at the history, a lot of what he talked about, a lot of what he was asserting on the international stage directed at Canada are the things that are in the Truth and Reconciliation, recognition of our sovereignty, our traditions, our language, all of those things. So, he's has a great impact, not just in our community, and not just for Indigenous people in this Canada, but Indigenous people worldwide. And if you do any research around the Indigenous Forum at the United Nations in New York and in Geneva, there's a lot of attention paid to Indigenous rights and Deskaheh's role within it. So he's made a big impact all the way from Frog Pond to Geneva to, the Six Nations. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So if you have questions, feel free to come up to the microphones. We'll take our first audience question.
Yeah, it is Sherry. I just want to congratulate the team, first off, for just an astounding proposition and to execute it. It takes time to make quality films. I also, as a member of the Six Nations community for my whole life, you filled in so many holes in my knowledge of our history. I'm 4 of 6 of our Six Nations: Cayuga, Gayakoto, Mohawk, Gagiega. Pronunciation's a little off. Tuscarora and Oneida. So it's amazing for me as a member of the community, and I've been a professional performer my whole life, and how you pull that all together. And the one thing I have a question about, I guess, and I don't really, except I want to, I'm a programmer, a fellow who, does the selections of indigenous content for the Santa Fe International Film Festival. And I can't guarantee, of course, but I'd like to be the first to say that we could give you a world premiere in terms of America and all the other countries around the world, except Canada, of course, which happens around the second week of October. So between the second and third week, 5-day festival, and we'd love to have as many of you that can come. I know we could support some of you, of course, the creative side. Saki, God, it's such an amazing job. And I just want to explain to my guests of why the last-minute dance was exposed was because that particular dance and experience, your feet have to remain on the earth. And she did more of a fancy dance move in the animation. And, so stuff like that might not be obvious to some, but for us that work among our people a little bit, it became obvious. So congratulations. Thank you very much.
I think we have another question in the audience, and thank you very much for that. Thank you for the kind words.
I just had a quick question. Dr. Downey, you mentioned that this has been a work that you guys have been doing for a few years now, and how in the research process before you actually ended up picking the story, I was just curious about what challenges you may have faced during the research process and how you kind of overcame some of those challenges.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think ultimately the greatest challenge, and Tekenikhon can speak to this as well, and Jersey, is we have a very limited time. This was supposed to be 6 minutes. So when Saki and I were talking about this, it was supposed to be 6 minutes long. And we just couldn't do that. We couldn't do that. And so to tell this story, and ultimately the script itself, the voiceover, is in around 9.5 minutes. The layers and the complexity of this story, and being very, very mindful of every single word that we're saying, that we can present it to. When I had in mind, and I've done this already, I've quietly been going to high schools and sharing it with high school audiences. I love doing that. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do. It's also one of the most difficult things in the world to do as an audience, to keep their attention. But I really love doing that, but we wanted to let the language to be accessible as possible, but detailed and careful and thoughtful. And so that's why the script ended up taking so long. It took over a year, just 2.5 pages. 2 pages took a year, and I mean weeks and weeks and days of looking at it and editing it and sending it to Professor Monture and sending it to our collaborators and our partners to make sure that we were careful but got to the details of the things that we needed to get to. And so it also, there was a heavy weight for me, I will say that. I know I won't speak for the rest of the group, but there is a heavy weight because I'm trying to do the best that I can and honor this story as a person not from that community, right? But has a long connection to that community. And so it means a lot to me. Like it means, I actually can't put it into words how much it means to me to be able to have the opportunity to work with all these brilliant people and to tell this story. And so to do it carefully and to do it very thoughtfully, but get to the details and making it accessible was ultimately the greatest challenge of this project. So thank you for that question. I'm going to ask a question to the students. So the brilliant minds behind the project. So Tekenikhon Jersey, there's so many wonderful moments in the film. And it might take you a couple times to see it, to catch them. But ultimately, there's so many wonderful moments in the film and the story that we got to see the scenes come to life. So as we envisioned the script coming to life, what was one scene or part of Deskaheh's story that you enjoyed seeing come together?
I'll speak to that first. There it is. I think one of my favorite parts about the animation and seeing it come together was the scenes that encompass like the water drum and the dancing. Growing up, knowing the dances and songs and still learning them to this day, you don't ever really think that you're going to see it be presented in a way where it's so genuine and true and with such good intention. It's not a video recording of somebody dancing. It was like a hand-drawn animation of this person dancing, and watching it come to life in the animation and the story that it holds with that was so unreal to me. I honestly can't put it into words either, but that was definitely my favorite scene.
I think for me, it would probably have to be the public lectures and the scenes where he's talking to like a whole bunch of people in Europe, because I think that was one of the parts that stood out most to me, just reading the biographies, because we didn't get to talk about this too much in the animation, but there's a lot of intent that went into his lectures and the way he even spoke and like who he targeted it, like when he was speaking, and even the way he dressed. So I feel like seeing those scenes in the film was really interesting, just especially knowing like the true like meanings behind like those lectures, and yeah.
I think we have a couple more questions in the audience.
Hello? Okay, Nico's not surprised that I'm up here. But knowing how difficult group projects can be, or like working on a research team, and you guys had so many possibilities and like captured all of this context and all of these like this huge story, but that means there's so many decisions to make. How do you even begin to make those decisions? Like, what did the meetings look like? And also, side question, why did you guys choose like the ink, the graphite? Like, is that a historical thing, or what is the reasoning for that?
Anyone want to jump in? You start. Okay, I'll start. The decision-making process is very long and complex because literally, word by word, scene by scene,
we have to make really challenging decisions. What are we going to cut? What are we going to keep? What are we going to emphasize? What's appropriate to emphasize? And that's where you have an incredible team put together to be able to make those decisions that we were all fortunate to be a part of, but also our community collaborators and those partners. So we would show the script or show scenes to individuals like Rick Hill and Rick Monture and Heather George, and share those things to say, okay, is this appropriate? Is this well done? And a lot of those decisions were ultimately, I think, a team effort to make those. And we had to make scenes originally we were hoping to include a lot more beating scenes. But the animation was like kind of ballooning and spiraling, so we had to kind of cut that back a little bit in order to make, well, we went over our timeline, but to try to make it as reasonable as possible for the animator and for the team. So that was a difficult one. I can speak to the colors really quickly because it's a question I always get. I've gotten this question a few times now already, presenting this. So ultimately, in Indigenous studies, there's this idea of, it's a theory. It's just a set of ideas about resurgence. Ultimately, the argument is that we should be focusing on the Indigenous inside, in addition to focusing on the colonial inside. How do we rebuild the fires of our governance? How do we rebuild languages? How do we rebuild our land stewardship and these types of things? Well, we didn't have the time to explain that set of ideas in the animation and in the script, so we did it through color. And purple was the color. Comes from the wampum, of course, wampum beads and the shells. But ultimately, the purples in the scenes are, to me, the resurgent activities, the activity of the spoken word, of the brilliance, of the Indigenous brilliance being shared. The reds are an interesting one because at first we went back and forth, Saki and the team and I went back and forth on the grays. And Kian Debicki, who's in Indigenous Studies, Professor Kian Debicki, actually put it in better words than I could ever capture it a couple weeks ago and said, grays are neutral, and nothing Canada ever did was neutral or passive. And so that's where the reds came in. It was, how do we make it bold? And it is a historical story, a piece of scholarly research, but it is also a piece of entertainment in a way. And so I and the team kind of made the decision that we're going to be bold. Like, let's go bold. Use reds and use that color scheme. The other thing is we did incorporate some of the grays. So the grays did happen. For instance, the dehorner scene originally was in red, and it wasn't appropriate. It wasn't what we were trying to say. So ultimately, we went more towards a gray color scheme and that scene specifically. And so these were all conversations that took place over 2 years. But I think, Tekenikhon, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, there it is. In terms of like what it was like working in this team compared to like group projects or research projects in school, it was vastly different. Yes, we still had to send those emails and figure out what times we could meet that would work best for everybody, and that was like the biggest challenge. But in terms of meeting to make the decisions, like somebody would say something and then the next person would just build off that idea, and so everything just came together by building off of each other's ideas. And when it came to having to like cut scenes like the actor beating stuff to make the animation fit into the extended timeline, it was kind of a group decision, and we kind of had to like make the hard decision of like what scenes could we cut that doesn't take away from the story. And then in terms of like, yeah, the colors, I would have to agree with Dr. Downey, like for me too, like the purple is definitely that symbol of resurgence for our histories and our stories, as well as like the symbolism of Indigenous sovereignty throughout our histories and still today. And then again with the red, with like the colonialism and things that have happened. and the reasons that we chose it to be bold and to show our histories and tell it our way.
Perfect. Thank you guys. Great job.
Thank you very much for the question. We have probably time for one or two more. Yeah.
Hi. I just want to say thank you guys for showing this project. I was one of the research assistants who worked on it, so it's really fantastic to kind of see how it ended up, the final product, seeing it from start when I came on 2 years ago to now is just incredible. So thank you and fantastic job to all of you. My question is, was there a reason why you picked this particular story to share in this format? And then also, what positives do you think showing history like this has to our field, as historians?
Jersey or no? Why did we tell this story?
Sure. There's, excuse me. There's lots of these stories, and they all kind of interconnect. Like lacrosse, like you said, like your sort of research on lacrosse led to this, in a way. And as everyone, Haudenosaunee people here know, lacrosse is integral to who we are, goes way back to the earliest days. So I think these types of stories, Deskaheh's is particularly timely now, 100 years after his passing and everything happening internationally with Indigenous rights, for sure. And there's many, many more to be told. And each story leads to a different story. This is a high-profile one, but each of those individuals that were shown at the end there, which I think is a great touch to sort of gesture towards other people who've not, this sort of activism did not go away with Deskaheh. It exists each and every day at Six Nations and around the country. But these individuals who aren't as high-profile have done amazing work for our people too. David Hill and Sophie Martin, Emily General, all those folks. So I think that's an important entryway in to tell these stories, to get younger people interested and in a format that's not a dry, dusty textbook or a dry, boring class from Allan or I. It's a way to kind of excite your interest and your curiosity about, okay, what else is there to be told here? What else can we think about? What is all happening here? And yeah, that's what I would say. And I showed this to a few folks back home, and their big reaction was, we need more of these. We need more of these sorts of things to pick up these little topics that can tell the bigger story too, right? Whatever forum we can have to, whatever genre we can operate in to tell this is what we need. Like even Deskaheh's radio speech that his voice sounded a lot like yours. I don't know, that's kind of incredible, but anyway, it's just coincidence. But even then, in 1925, radio was a brand new technology. Like it just really was brand new. So, Deskaheh, a traditional man, Levi General, would understand that these new forms of technology are also what we need to utilize. How can these help us tell our story? How can these new technologies help us to achieve justice for our people and get our story out there? And this is yet another example of that, right? Modern animation to do that, and I think that's what's in operation here. That's my answer on the fly.
Well, thank you very much for the question. And before you sit down, I do want to recognize this is Grace Wilcox. Grace served as one of our very early graduate research assistant in collecting all of the material on Deskaheh. So thank you very much, and it's great to see you.
It's great to see you. Thank you.
I'll conclude with one last question, and then we'll transition. But I wanted to ask Saki. Saki, through this creative process, I guess for the audience, Saki doesn't know anything generally about the story when we approach her about it, and does this incredible amount of research that doesn't get recognized. Like, for instance, the Gastoa, or the headdress. Like, Saki researched that for a very long time to be able to draw that, or the movements and discussions about this work. And so I just wanted to recognize the research brilliance of that part of putting this together. But I also wanted to ask you, what are some of the challenges of putting an animation like this together that we might not see?
So definitely limited time was the biggest challenge for me. There are some days like, what if I cannot finish it on time? Because this year was a very important year, 100th year anniversary. So we had to release the film this year and October on time. And I was like so overwhelmed some days by the amount of work still left to be animated. And I guess whenever I felt like this, I focused on the task at hand and just kept moving every day, moving forward every day. And that kind of like baby step approach was very, very effective to complete the film. And another thing, I guess another challenge was that I wasn't familiar with the whole history behind the film. So I had to do a lot of research looking up archival images and back and forth communication with Allan and the team, and that really helped. But like questions like, oh, what is the landscape like back in 1920s? Or like, what would a radio station look like? And you have all these different questions. And each scene, like you have to know what everything would look like and have to be accurate as much as possible. So that was another challenge.
I just wanted a microphone that works now. I just wanted to compliment you so much because I wouldn't have known as a community member the level of detail that you were able to achieve, but not really knowing the story or the look of the community. You did that really, really well. And two things that stood out to me, like Allan said, even though it's short, I've seen it a half a dozen times now, there's little details that kind of really come forward. So I encourage you to watch it repeatedly when you get a chance. Two things, some folks here would recognize the old community hall in Ashwegan where the proclamation was nailed. I don't know where you found a picture of that, but you did that remarkably well. It brought back a lot of memories for myself and the older people in the crowd that remember that building quite well. So the actual council house does appear like the one at Six Nations is still standing now. To this day, we're currently underway to restore it. It appears at the very end with a thank you to the Confederacy Council. That's that brick building at the end, at the beginning of the credits is still there. That's where the chiefs were meeting. They built that in 1863, 4 years prior to Confederation, by the way. Built that in 1863, and that's where the Confederacy Council met and administered affairs of Six Nations for decades. That particular day when Colonel Morgan and the RCMP came to remove them, the council house was under renovation. So they were over just in the Ashwegan Fairgrounds, maybe not the community hall, but right beside it, at a building that is no longer there anymore. So I think just a little level of detail. I mentioned this to Allan, and he got on the phone with Saki, and they made that happen. And it was really that quick. Wouldn't have known it took that long. Sorry about that. But just to try to get the as accurate as possible as you can in a short time frame. And the other thing I liked this time that I identified this time was those chairs you had when the Confederacy got removed, and you had those round, sort of old antique furniture chairs, which, if anyone's seen old pictures, those were the types of chairs that were in the old council house. That image of them being vacant says a lot, and then to be replaced by these square, straight-back chairs, and they're populated now by, band council and as an arm of Ottawa in Indian Affairs. I thought that was a really nice, subtle touch that I didn't notice till this time around, so it encourages repeated viewing. So again, thanks.
Well, it's been an honor to share this time with you, and thank you very much for coming out and to make this event so special. Ultimately, the goal of the animation is to help spread this remarkable piece of history with a wide audience. And we hope that the short film project will support the incredible work that's already being done in Haudenosaunee communities by people like Rick Monture, Susan Hill, Rick Hill, Heather George, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council at Six Nations of the Grand River, just to name a few. There's already this amazing work that's happening, so please check that out or get in touch with us. In the next couple of weeks, the animation will be available free of charge via the Resurgent Histories YouTube channel and our website. And we hope to tour it in high schools and all over to share this. So I'll now turn it over to Rick, who is going to help lead us in closing the event.
Sure. I'm actually going to turn this over to another fella. I found a Tekenikhon man there, spot in. Teatos is going to do the closing for us. So, in our ways, we do the opening, and I've always been told it's important that we do the closing to sort of bring closure to our event and send everyone off safely. So, when we do this, our closing words is just a way to bring our minds together again and release everybody to the rest of our day. And there's also food, right, Alan? That's the other thing. There's food out in the lobby, so that's the important thing. So I don't want to stand in the way of you and your snacks. Anyway, Ganyawe, everybody. Ganyawe to Alan, Saki, Jersey. Oh, sorry. I'm blanking on your name. Deganito, sorry. Great job. Really, really great job. Anyway, without further ado, take it away, sir.
If you could remove your hats and hoods, I kindly ask you to do so before I start this. Oh, hey. Daneo na kajokwa. Asmara hosios de gatnioli wes. Wageli wayanda kwe untu nen. Anga on the headstay, neo handu galiwadekwa. Ne yandwali wadi hanto sungwe diso sungwawi gano heladuns. Ne yueza jitsego kadoga. Skana aidwane dunyusake. Ne gadiwia gwega huskaji andwa huenu ni ne angwet negula. Dande wa dahnu helad, da tonio duhagene angwet negu. Dane ona andwa loli jiyo hunjade. De yungwesi dakat salakwa, ne yunkinulha de tinuela dunk. Ne loyanto nin agwego sungwe diso. Ne gadiwia gwego huskaji andwa huenu ni da yetinu helandu. Nen yunkinulha ohunja. Dane tonayo duhagene angwet nigu. Dane ona andwa loli sungwa gawana skanya dali. Ne dogaske sungwa toze nen galiwi. Ne gadiwi agwego huskaji andwa huenu ni ne angwet nigu. Da chide wanu helandu nen skanya dali. Dane tonayo duhagene angwet nigu. Dane ona ande hotloli gaye new gwerge de huli wadenyata. Ne yotsununya jitsego kadoga ayunkia danu uhadi nen skana aidwane dunyusek. Ne gadiwi ne agwego hoskaji andwa huenuni ne angwengu da yetinu helandu gaye new gwerge de huli wadenyata. Dane tonayo duhagene angwengu. Dane ona andwa loli lauha nin galuyage tanagle nin sungwe diso. Ne dogaske yotsanunyat gadoga jitsego dahusa uhadi nin skana aidwane dunyusek. Ne gadiwi agwego huskaji andwa huenu ni da chidawanu helandu nin sungwe diso. Dane tonayo duhagene angwetnigu. Ona andwali wanenge gaye new gwedage jitsego ayunki nigulale neona ayungwa jatatewe nen jinu ayungwa squahluni. Dane to wadgatweni ji tonyole nen kano heladunsla. Dane to na yodu hagene angwenigu. Dane to.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone for coming out. Thank you for the closing as well. But thank you for everyone coming out. You are all invited right outside these doors in the atrium. We have food, coffee, tea, and hopefully we can share some stories. Thank you very much.